In HeavyBid, there's two components of equipment cost. One is the rent and one's the operation. And I'm going to set up a piece of equipment, first of all, just a simple rent where there's really no calculation behind it. I'm going to set up a skid steer. Let's just call it a John Deere skid steer. 318 John Deere skid steer. And I'm going to set the rent rate at $25 an hour with an EOE rate of maybe $15 an hour. So very simple. There's nothing behind this calculation. It is just $25 per hour. However, you also have the option of making this based on a monthly, daily, weekly rate. And I would now go into the rent breakdown. And to start this process, I tab over. I have the option of going inside or outside rent, depending if I'm going to rent from a dealer or I own it. And I have to put in calculated to actually calculate this based on some monthly or weekly rent. Now you notice there's three other options here, and then we'll discuss this later in the equipment analysis screen. And when we use that screen, these will populate this field, but I can't indicate that right now. So I'm going to base it on calculated, and you notice it defaults to a monthly rent, and I'm going to say that this is $2,600 a month. But I can change this. Once I save it, I can come back and change to weekly or daily or hourly rate. Most times it's going to be these three. And if I want to have a weekly rate, I could also set up another skid steer and maybe I'll have a different code and base that on a weekly rate. Now let's go look at the components of this. I can come down here to the single equipment cost breakdown, see this a little better. And what I can do, I can even fill it out for the outside rent now, so that when I do have this, maybe all my skid steers are tied up on a certain estimate, all I have to do now is indicate outside rent, and it will be based on this rate as opposed to the inside rent. So it's a good idea for each piece of equipment. If you anticipate maybe having to rent it outside, go ahead and put in the rate, and then it's just a matter of clicking on the radio button which option you're going to use inside the estimate. Now let's go look at the actual equipment analysis screen. And what's nice about having this based on a monthly or daily or weekly rate is I can utilize this rent time method. So I'm going to go down here and find a piece of equipment that maybe I have to rent over a longer time period than what the estimate is based on right now. Water truck is a good example. They sit around a lot, and maybe I have to, instead of 3 months, I have to actually have it there for 6 months, the life of the job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this right here, and I am going to make that a 6. And I'm going to update this. And you notice right now that's almost double the cost, obviously, because I have 3.02. It takes 6 divided by 3.02 will give me a factor of 1.99. And I'm not going to change the rent rate. I'm just going to change the rent percent. So now when I go and update the estimate, it will go and actually put this rent anywhere where a water truck occurs. It will put a factor of 1.99 in the estimate. Now I have two other options. I have the equipment bid item where I would set up, and this would be only available in the comprehensive version, where I would set up a separate bid item for example, large piece of equipment where I'd mob it in, mob it out, operate it for a year. And then it would go back to an equivalent bid item or equivalent piece of equipment in the estimate and calculate my rent rate. I can also take a piece of equipment and base the rent rate on purchase minus salvage, and it would take these two numbers and then apply it against the hours used and then calculate a rent rate. So using these three methods, you can have a very accurate method, a very accurate estimate on equipment cost.